that's for me, living life so merrily. It's so easy, can't you see? Polka, polka, that's for me. Polka, polka, everyone come along. It's lots of fun.
Miguel Iterati back here at the Talk and Shoot podcast. We're going to fly solo again here for another Talk and Shoot, a session of talking some shoot about professional boxing. And in this last week, we had professional boxing. We hit the big news again, but really there was just like a flatness to it. And what I'm talking about is the announcement that Floyd Mayweather Jr. is going to be fighting Andre Berto on September 12th at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. I mean, this has been, the kind of dominant news. Obviously, the boxing calendar goes on, and there's boxing all over the world. We'll get into some of the boxing that's going to be on the Premier Boxing Champions broadcast this Friday night, coming up here August 14th. But for right now, let's stick with this Mayweather thing because he's been roundly criticized for the choice of opponents. He's taken Andre Berto out of Florida. He's a 30-3 fighter. He's a former world champion. He held the WBC world title at welterweight for a good long time. Made several defenses, against moderate competition. He's been on TV, was well known, the whole thing. But really, back in April of 2011, the wheels came off of his perfect record and everything when he took a bad loss to Victor Ortiz. It was actually a great fight, but Ortiz won the unanimous decision. Ortiz parlayed that into a fight with Mayweather, which turned into that embarrassment that was. Since then, Berto's really not ever righted the ship. He's gone 3-2 since the loss to Ortiz. Taking losses to Argentina's Jesus Soto Caras and Robert Guerrero. So he's not losing to chumps, but at the same time, that type of record heading into a fight with Mayweather, an all-time great, supposedly, doesn't really bode well. In his last outing, this last March, he fought Josecito Lopez, and he won the interim WBA title for the world title at welterweight. So he brings that to the table here against Floyd Mayweather, who holds the Super World title for the WBA and the WBC. So Berto is basically coming out. I'm happy for Berto. Berto gets himself a nice payday. He's a solid veteran. Once you get into his family story and you learn about his family is basically a fighting family. His brothers are in MMA. His father was in one of the early UFCs and was a longtime judge for Pride in Japan. So they come from fighting roots, and they have a situation where they're not of money. They're from Haiti, and they've worked hard for everything that they have. Berto's already been a world champion and had some moderately good paydays and stuff, but this is clearly going to be his biggest payday, and he's a hard-working guy and possibly deserves it. But what Mayweather is doing is really just, I think, to me, if you analyze it correctly, this is vintage Mayweather. Mayweather is always all about the money. Now, there's no way, in any way, shape, or form, that this fight, which looks like it's going to air on Showtime, so it won't even be on pay-per-view, that this fight can be monetized the way the Pacquiao fight was. Now, I think it could be pretty much discussed almost as a fact, but once you've done a job, whatever it is, for a certain amount of money, it is very difficult to do the same job again for less money, especially considerably less money. If you're a secretary and they cut half your pay, you're not going to be at your sharpest doing your secretary work. And I think that effect psychologically carries over with Mayweather in many ways. He really just got a massive payday. Nothing is really going to interest him. They've really basically, let's go over this part. The Berto fight was a poorly kept secret. It's been, in the rumor mills for the last several weeks now that this was going to be the fight that happened. But, the fact is Mayweather's announced it with about 5 weeks left. I mean, that's not even really what you need in the run-up to a big fight for publicity, and it almost seems an afterthought here. He wants to notch his 48th win, and walk off and tell everybody how he's the greatest and stuff like that. And here's what may happen, because it's happened earlier in his career. He's cashed in, he's gotten some big paydays, he's retired, and inevitably he's come back. And of course he's come back and to make more money. At some point, does he have all the money in the world? Yes, but does he have the potential to spend some, the majority of that and need another payday in a few years? That could be what we're looking at here. But for right now, Mayweather's just bored, going through the motions, and he just wants to get this fight over with. Doing it against Berto is not impressive. Doing it at the MGM Grand is not impressive. Those are both black marks against him in his quest to be called the best ever, in my opinion. I mean, the bottom line with Mayweather is he had Amir Khan begging for the fight. I mean, Amir Khan has done everything but punch his own mother in the face trying to get this fight. You've got Kell Brook, a very, very talented and up-and-coming respected champion in England. Any one of those fights would have filled a 60,000-seat stadium in England. Mayweather could have gotten out of his box and done something that was a little bit challenging, show his supporters that he cares, that he wants to do something, noticeable and stuff. Instead, it's just a spit in the face. Hey, we're going to fight Berto. Come pay me one last time, and I'm out of here. It's just, like I said, it's vintage Mayweather. It's disrespectful, even to his own fans, even to the people that like him. I don't see how this is an appealing fight for him. I do hope Berto wins, and the promotion of the live event and what we'll see on Showtime looks to be a very, very good card, top to bottom. Once you get to Mayweather and Berto, of course, that fight kind of transcends what's going to happen in the ring, and it's all going to be about the talk around it and stuff. But the rest of the card looks good and has some British influences, which is where, maybe a potential fight with a British fighter like Kell Brook or Amir Khan would have benefited Mayweather, would have gotten him into markets in England and stuff that he really can't have tapped fully yet, And what I'm talking about is that in support is Badou Jack, defending his WBC World Super Middleweight title against England's George Groves. Now, Groves is 21-2. His two losses are to Carl Frosch. Frosch is retired. And he gave Frosch all he could handle, in some of those rounds and stuff. And he's a good fighter. And he's been biding his time. He's won a couple of fights. He gets to challenge Badou Jack for a world title, and this might be a fast track for Groves into a world title. Now, with all respect to Badou Jack is 19-1-1. In his last fight, he took a majority decision from Anthony Durrell, where he was, a big underdog, to take the WBC World Super Middleweight title on there. But a lot of the common thinking is that Badou Jack's in a little bit over his head that, he did win the World Championship, and he won it from Durrell, who's a very credible guy. But Durrell, I don't know if something was wrong that day or if he was just on the beginning of a downturn or what the situation is. It may be just a bad night. But common thinking is that Badou Jack may be in slightly over his head for this fight with George Groves. Not that Groves is an all-universe type of boxer, but Groves, based on his experience of fighting guys like Frosch a couple of times and, coming up, he's beaten veterans like Glenn Johnson and like I said, coming up through the British system where he's held British titles and, Commonwealth titles and things like that. That's very good, solid experience for George Groves. And, Groves, I don't know if Groves would have been ready to fight Arthur Abraham or some of the other super middleweights. But in this particular case, when Badou Jack is there, he's got to feel that this is a fast track for him to get into the title picture. So that's an interesting fight in support of Mayweather and Berto. You've also got the rematch between Orlando Salido and Roman Martinez for the WBO World Super Featherweight Champion. Obviously, these guys fought. Salido lost the belt to Martinez when they met here last April. That was down in Puerto Rico, where obviously Martinez is the hometown boy. And, now you've got Salido trying to regain his belt. Salido, really a fun fighter to watch. So, like I said, they put good fights on the undercard. And the other card fight that they're advertising is a veteran 10-rounder at Super Welter with Vanes Martirosyan facing Ishe Smith. another one of the guys on Mayweather's promotional company. Smith and Badu Jack are part of the money team, as they call it there. So that's what's going on with the Mayweather thing. I think it's a big disappointment. I think, his hype machine is big. He's got a lot of money right now. We'll see how much of that he uses in a media campaign and stuff. I think he thinks he's already convinced himself he's the best ever. And, we're going to hear that afterwards. But I think anybody who knows anything about boxing would not really even take that seriously. I think we could talk about being the best of this era. The bottom line is I do think boxing is about engaging your opponent as well. And though not taking punishment is terrific, and the fact is health-wise and stuff, you do have to take care of yourself. And Mayweather, has not taken a lot of punishment, either up top or, to the body and stuff. And that's good. I do appreciate that. But it's not a sport where that's the only goal is to not get hit. It is a give and take where you are going to have to take some punishment in order to set up some bigger things. And Mayweather hasn't really done anything but dominate the avoidance in basically the last 10 years. So I personally would not even call him the best of this era. I would call him the best maybe defensive fighter of this era. But they're more exciting and fighters that have, technical ability that gets close. At any rate, that's an argument for a different podcast. What we want to do now is we want to concentrate a little bit on some of what's going on in boxing in the short term, because what we've got here is this Friday night, we've got the Premier Boxing Champions Series returning to Spike TV, I believe. And that's a cool thing because, they took last week off, but they've been pretty much hitting us with boxing on, major television available, almost every week. And so the Premier Boxing Champions is basically carrying a lot of the boxing flags, that are out there on TV. So this weekend, what do we got in store? Prudential Center in New Jersey, August 14th, Friday. You got basically a card focused on the heavyweights, especially with what's going to air. The full live fight card has about 10 fights on it. Some nice talent on there. You got heavyweight Travis Kaufman, who's 28-1. People are still waiting to see about him. He's been flying under the radar. You got a couple undefeated prospects in light heavyweight. Michael Seals at 19-0. Featherweight Camille Lachuz at 20-0. And the undercard is packed like that. What we will see on the Spike TV broadcast will be the three main fights. And the main event is featuring heavyweights, and that's got Antonio Tarver and Steve Cunningham. Cunningham's coming in slight favorite at the sport books right now for that fight over Tarver. They're both veterans. They're both world champions at other weight classes. They're up in heavyweights, and Tarver's in the 220s, while Cunningham's been fighting around 210. So not major big heavyweights, but both guys ranked in the top 15. Both guys would like, obviously, to parlay a win here into a big payday type of fight. And that's what's going on with that one. In support on the broadcast is going to be another heavyweight fight with Artur Spilka, who's 19-1, and he's facing Yasmani Consuegra, a Cuban who's at 17-1. Spilka, he's still trying. I think, Spilka is an interesting case because he's a guy that comes from Poland, and Poland, I believe, to be one of the real fervent backers of their fighters. And there's a very big Polish crowd that follows fighting around. I think the influence of Polish boxers can be felt even in the grassroots scenes in Chicago, in the Northeast and stuff as well. So, Poland plays a big impact. And what you have here is you got a kid who came up through the rankings and got his way into a fight with Brian Jennings back in the beginning of 2014. And he took a TKO loss to Jennings. And since after that, his follow-up fight after almost a year off, he fought Thomas Adamek. Now, I believe as a relatively younger guy that Adamek had brought him in to beat him. Adamek was trying to bounce back himself, and he was, a top-rated heavyweight, world champion also in other weight classes, and Adamek wanted to get himself into the title picture at heavyweight. A win over an undefeated kid like Spilka at home was a bounce-back fight for him, and Spilka surprises him and beats him. Now, what that does to Adamek is Adamek goes into retirement, and that's where he is right now. And Spilka's the guy that retired him, the guy that beat him in Poland, etc., etc. But is Spilka the real deal? That's still an open question. Since the Adamek fight, he's had a couple of fights. He fought veterans, Manuel Quesada, Ty Cobb, if you know them from the circuit here. He stopped both of them. These were in the United States, and he's been fighting frequently. April was Ty Cobb. In June of 2015 was Quesada, and now he's back here with Consejo. He's trying to add rounds. He's trying to find out more about himself, because I think he took a big jump with the win over Adamek, who was a rated guy in the rankings, and he is still a guy who is coming along. But a nice prospect in Arthur Spilka, somebody to watch there. Consuega, one of those Cubans, he's also coming off a loss, and he's one of those Cubans that, it's hard to get a grip on him. It seems like a lot of Eastern Europeans have this, not everybody can be Lomachenko, you know what I mean? So you get a lot of these Eastern Europeans that were great amateurs and stuff like that, and not all of them translate to the absolute top level. I think the same thing happens with the Cubans in that, we're going to get waves of Cubans in every weight class, because that island is made around boxing. And, you're going to fear everybody's Guillermo Rigondo, and it's not going to be the case. I think Consuegra is a heavyweight that got his record to 17-0. On the fast track, and then took a loss to an undefeated fighter, Dominic Breazeale, in his last outing. So he's trying to bounce back. It is a clash of two guys that do not want to take another loss on their record. So I think that that's a nice, tight fight there. But even more interesting for the Premier Boxing Champions broadcast that's coming up is the co-main event, which is actually for the WBO World Cruiserweight Championship. It's Marco Huck of Germany, 38-2-1 record, facing Krzysztof Glowacki, another Pole, undefeated at 24-0. Glowacki is. Both of them are fighting outside their home countries for the first time, obviously on the Premier Boxing Champions. You've got Al Heyman, making some type of assessment or call that, these guys are talented and they deserve, attention on a world level. So here's Marco Huck fighting in the United States in his 40-something fight, and he's fighting in the United States for the first time. The interesting thing about Huck, there are a few tie-ins here. And I'm going to go over the odds for these fights here in just a minute here. But there are a few interesting tie-ins in terms of, you got Huck. Huck has been threatening to go to heavyweight for a long time. He's been on the Cruiserweight World Championship scene for a long time. And Huck is just about ready to go. Huck has been, trying to get a fight with Klitschko. Obviously, in Germany, that would be a major fight. And Huck, I don't believe Huck has forgotten about moving up to heavyweight here. This is a defense of his cruiserweight title. Should Huck come out on top, and in the main event, should Steve Cunningham defeat Antonio Tarver, you have a natural setup for a fight there on the Premier Boxing Champ. What you have is some interesting tie-ins here, because basically what you have is you have to go back into history. But again, this gives you an idea of how deep and experienced both Huck and Steve Cunningham are. Is back in 2007, Huck became the IBF World Cruiserweight Champion by defeating Steve Cunningham. So they both have that pedigree there, and that rematch is something that at heavyweight might be interesting for the Premier Boxing Champions broadcast to try to put on here. Like I said, what you have here is you have Huck potentially winning, Cunningham potentially winning. Huck could move up in weight and actually take a fight at heavyweight, which would benefit his cause in trying to move up there. In his opponent, Glowacki, now, again, the thing about Poland is a lot of fighters, and especially light heavyweight, and cruiserweight. They're all over the place in terms of talent, and it's deep, and they have a lot of them. You've got Glowacki right now is the number 2 rated cruiserweight out of Poland, and that's really not, actually says something about him, but he's never fought outside of Poland. And I mean, the God's honest truth is here we were talking about, 8 years ago in 2007, where Marco Huck was fighting Steve Cunningham for a world title, and Glowacki turned pro in 2008, so he's going to have some youth. and possible, some speed advantages and things like that. But right now, this is a step-up fight for Glowacki because he's got nothing on his resume that compares to the experience that Marco Huck has heading into this fight. Let's stick with the rest of the boxing calendar for this weekend here, because on August 15th, we got a couple of, noteworthy appearances that are being made. I don't know that any of them are going to impact the world scene just yet, but down in Brazil, fighting up at middleweight, we've got, former world super featherweight champion Acelino Popo Freitas. Popo's the nickname there, and like I said, this kid is making a comeback. He hasn't fought at like a real high level in about 8 years, and that's a long time to be away from the boxing ring. He's going to be turning 40 here in September, so he's not quite 40 years old. He took most of his 30s off. He fought in 2012. He fought a comeback fight in Uruguay against Michael Oliveira. Oliveira was being hyped as a potential prospect there, and he won that fight. He knocked Oliveira out in the ninth round. So he still is sharp. He's going to be way up in weight class. He's at middleweight now, not at world. He's been a lightweight champion and a super featherweight champion. So he's a little guy now coming up in weight here. Now, don't expect much from his competition for this fight, because what you got is Mateo Damian Verón, an Argentinian, journeyman. He's 21-16 record. He's lost the majority of his recent fights. He went 0 for 2014, going 0-6, and he's 1-2 so far in 2015. So he's a fighter, keeps busy. Freitas, not sure what he's doing, not sure if he wants to, come back, and obviously he may want to score, a big payday at middleweight. You're sitting there with Gennady Golovkin as the head honcho there. I can't believe a guy retired 8 years really wants to come back and fight that guy. But, Freitas would certainly be looking for a payday here. And, at one point in his career, he was one of the most talented, super featherweight little guys out of there. He came out, actually, a little bit of boxing history. This year and last year, the United States and had the Boxino tournaments that came out. And there were several fighters that came out there and made some impact in their weight classes and stuff. And the Boxino tournaments were a recycle of the Boxino tournaments from the very late 90s. I believe it was 99 that the Boxino tournament ran its actual first event and then took many years off until last year. The winner of the first Boxino tournament was Acelino Freitas, Popo Freitas. The kid was a talented fighter. All fighting aside here, he was 39-2 is his record now, so it's still very marketable in terms of that. And like I said, I think you're looking here at a potential, or a near 40-year-old who's looking for one last potential big payday. Sad to see. I hope he's still sharp and good and fights well and entertains the fans and doesn't get himself hurt. But coming back for money is sometimes something that you don't like to see in boxing. So I hope that's not 100% the case with him. Not about money, but continuing on in his career this weekend also, and this is also one of those things that kind of hurts to say. I don't like to say it, but up at the Foxwoods Resort in Connecticut, we've got Roy Jones Jr. fighting again, and Roy Jones at cruiserweight, he's 61-8 overall. He's taking another record. He's logging rounds at this point. He's fighting Billy Bailey. Billy Bailey's 12-19 overall, so it's not really going to be something that's a threat. What you got with Roy Jones is that he's got not only this fight this weekend with Billy Bailey, but 2 weeks later he has a fight booked against a fighter named Danny Santiago, and finally a fight in England September 12th against Tony Moran. So Roy Jones taking a big bite out of the old school and booking fights every couple of weeks here for the foreseeable future. That's kind of, one of those things. I don't know what to say about it. I mean, Roy, he's 46 years old now. It's a situation where he's a certain Hall of Famer. At one point, he was probably the greatest fighter standing on the planet on a given day. when he had his heyday. But he's so past his heyday. When he fought, back in the 2009 through 2011 series, he rematched Hopkins, or rather he fought Hopkins and fought Denis Lebedev. And he had a situation where, I do apologize, that's his only fight with Hopkins, but he also lost to Danny Green, took a knockout there. He dropped 3 fights in a row, and that would have been the perfect time to say, I'm going to call it quits. Unfortunately, in a situation like this, you got a competitive nature in Jones, or something where he's just misplaced, but he wants to etch his legacy. And he's got a pedigree of obviously having been, a long-time light heavyweight champion, middleweight champion. He's held a heavyweight championship, and he just missed that cruiserweight belt, and that is what he claims continues to drive him. Now, since the Lebedev loss, he has gone 7-0. He hasn't really fought anybody, recognizable or of a world-beating type of nature. He did beat one of the Polish up-and-comers, kid named Paweł Glazewski, who was undefeated at the time, but he won a split decision, and nothing there tells you that, Jones is ready to keep competing. But Jones is fixating on trying to get a cruiserweight world championship match at 46 years old, and he continues that this weekend. Like I said, it's something to watch there, because what you got with Jones is you got a guy there who's going to be trying to fight every 2 weeks, which you do not see in modern times, especially you don't see that with a guy of Jones's level or pedigree. Interesting, somewhere along in this podcast, we talked about Glenn Johnson. Veteran Glenn Johnson is fighting down in Florida this weekend in an interesting card. If you're down in Miami, anywhere near Wynwood Stadium, this card may or may not pop up at the books here. But anyway, let's get right into what we were talking about, which is what I wanted to go back to the Spike TV Premier Boxing Champions broadcast of July 14th, so that we can go over the odds here. And I'll start with Artur Spilka against Consuegra, Yasmani Consuegra, the Cuban. It's a heavyweight bout. Spilka, like I said, he's looking to continue to make a name for himself. I think with the fact is as a Polish fighter, he's going to have some backing and some people that are interested in seeing him go far. And he's been logging rounds since beating Thomas Adamic, maybe trying to pick up some experience and some additional ring time in there. And I think this is the case here. He's a minus 1,100 favorite over Yasmani Consuegra, who comes back at plus 700. So that's one of those things where Spilka expected to pick up win number 20 here. Heading over to the world title fight at cruiserweight, you got Marco Huck, and Huck is a big favorite at minus 750 over Krzysztof Glowacki. Glowacki at plus 525. And the main event for these Premier Boxing Champions card this weekend features heavyweights Antonio Tarver and Steve Cunningham. Nice close line. Cunningham minus 185 favorite over Tarver. Tarver plus 160. Tarver, basically for the last 6 years, he's fought once a year, but he's worked his way up. And if you go by the BoxRec rankings, which are a mathematical formula, but they're out there, Tarver is the number 8 ranked heavyweight in the world. So a win over, Cunningham's not rated too shabbily either, because Cunningham's been a very busy fighter. But I think the winner of this is going to be trying to make a case to fight Deontay Wilder. It just makes sense in terms of, American versus American, and just the idea of Cunningham fighting Klitschko. Cunningham has been weighing about 210 pounds, for his heavyweight fights. I just don't see it. And obviously Tarver would like to fight somebody who's going to give him a payday, and obviously I would think that would mean a title fight. And, Klitschko is booked at the end of the year and is still, somebody who's going to be tough to pull into a fight, or tough for anybody to really look to want to make Antonio Tarver versus Vladimir Klitschko, or Steve Cunningham versus Vladimir Klitschko. So I think the winner here, likely Cunningham, but the winner here continues to fight and slog his way through, the heavyweight division, which has a lot of up-and-comers coming up as they try to define themselves. I think if Tarver wins, you have a situation where Tarver is going to hold off and wait to try to cash in and get one big last payday. Tarver also involved with his son, Antonio Tarver Jr., who's recently started his career and has had a handful of pro fights already, I think maybe 2 or 3. And, he could always ride off into the sunset and continue to train his son, obviously still be involved in the sport. So that's the Premier Boxing Champions this weekend. Obviously, we talked a little bit about what's going on with the Floyd Mayweather situation. I'd like to hear from you guys if you're out there. Maybe put some notes on the blog or whatever in terms of, are you disappointed with this? I mean, if Mayweather put this fight on pay-per-view, would you pay for it? Because I can certainly say that I would not. At any rate, that's the state of boxing right now. Going to close out this Talk and Shoot podcast. My name is Miguel Arati, and I've been Talk and Shoot. Thanks.